Do you know how much money is burned in modern war? The Gulf War in 1991, for example, as a war to change the traditional mode of combat, the United States only 42 days at the expense of 146 people, the so-called world's third largest military power, the Iraqi army was defeated. However, this is more than 40 days, it consumed $300 billion in military spending, an average of about $5 billion a day to burn. And this is still calculated at the time of crisis. If it is now, this figure will be even more huge. So how exactly did the Gulf War burn so much money? First of all, the first big reason for burning money is that the United States will be a large number of modern high-tech weapons into the actual war. January 17, 1991, the U.S. Army took the lead in sending helicopter gunships, the Baghdad area of early warning radar jamming and sabotage. Immediately after that, it gave the main charge to the F-117 stealth bombers. With the successive destruction of Iraqi communication buildings, Air Force command systems and other strategic locations, the links between Iraqi military units were completely cut off. Subsequently, the USAF's electronic jamming planes, F-15 fighter bombers, F-16 fighters, F-18 fighters, etc. went on the battlefield together and began to bombard Iraq's key military targets indiscriminately. During the 38 consecutive days of airstrikes, 50% of the strength of the Iraqi frontline forces and 25% of the strength of the rear forces were directly weakened. However, at that time, the cost of an F-117 stealth bomber was $106 million, and the cost of flying it was about $90,000 or so per hour. The cost of an F-15 was $30 million, and the cost of flying it was about $42,000 per hour. According to relevant data, more than 1,300 flights were flown on the first day of the battle, directly consuming $520 million, and that's just the cost of flights, not counting the continuous aerial refueling. Throughout the war, the F-117 stealth bomber flew more than 1,260 combat missions, totaling 6,900 flight hours. The coalition forces, on the other hand, flew a total of 109,800 sorties, which shows how much it consumed. In addition to the Air Force, this time the U.S. military deployed 6 major aircraft carrier battle groups to know that the aircraft carrier is a real gold-swallowing beast. According to relevant data, the Nimitz-class fleet one-day consumption up to $12 million, and this is still in the peace era. In conventional weapons, the most powerful is the missile. During the Gulf War, the U.S. military launched a total of 288 Tomahawk missiles, 158 Patriot missiles and more than 2,000 airborne air-to-air AGM-88 missiles, and the price of these missiles is not cheap. Tomahawk missiles are $1.3 million, Patriot missiles for $600,000, even airborne air-to-air AGM-88 missiles need $280,000, and this is still the tip of the iceberg of the number of missiles launched during the war. Of course, in addition to the combat equipment to burn money, the Army's logistical supply cost is a not negligible sky-high price. The atomic bomb exploded at 8:15 a.m. Japan time, approximately 580 meters above the hospital southeast of Sajiso Bridge, after 43 seconds of parabolic motion. On this day, clocks across Hiroshima stopped at 8:16. The intense wave of light from the atomic bomb explosion blinded thousands of people, and the heat of more than 6,000 degrees reduced everything to ashes, killing 30,000 people in the explosion that day. After the flash, sound wave and mushroom-shaped smoke cloud, a sea of fire and smoke enveloped the city. Within a radius of 14 square kilometers, 60,000 houses were all destroyed. Even the U.S. bombers that had already returned to their flights felt the shock wave of the explosion. Hours after the explosion, U.S. President Harry S. Truman gave the Japanese government an ultimatum, urging them to surrender immediately, but there was a delay in receiving a response. The Japanese side deliberated and decided that the war should continue. Such was their stubbornness and arrogance that the U.S. had to continue to entertain them with atomic bombs. On the morning of August 9, 2 B-29 bombers went to the skies over Kokura and Nagasaki to scout the weather conditions, while on the other side 3 B-29 bombers on this bombing mission took off from the Tennyson Island Air Base. At the front of the formation was the Boxka, piloted by Major Sweeney, which was carrying an atomic bomb named Fat Man. In the center was the Great Artist, which was responsible for measuring the explosion data, and at the end was the Great Stink, which was responsible for taking images of the explosion. Now the formation of bombers is preparing to meet at the rendezvous point at Okishima, Japan, but a few hours into the flight an accident occurs. The atomic bomb's fuse monitor lights up red, indicating that the bomb's fuse has been activated. The crew immediately went to check it out, and after careful inspection realized that the ground technician had connected 2 circuit switches incorrectly, but the problem was quickly solved. At 9:10 a.m., the Berkuska was the first to arrive at the rendezvous point at Ujiu Island, followed by the Great Artist. The 2 first arriving bombers circled over Okishima for nearly 40 minutes without waiting for the last Giant Stinker bomber. This was because the Giant Stinker had gotten lost in the thick clouds and was unable to reach the rendezvous point, so the Berkuska and the Great Artist had to continue their mission. They began their flight in the direction of Kokura at 9:50 a.m., and right in the middle of the flight another piece of bad news came in, as the weather conditions over Kokura began to deteriorate. At 10:44 a.m., when the Berkuska and the great artist arrived over Kokura, they realized that the entire city was covered in clouds and black smoke, so the pilots were unable to locate the target point through the clouds. As the pilots were told before departure that they could only bomb with an optical targeting system and not with unreliable radar guidance. So the two bombers had to continue circling over Kokura until the weather conditions improved. After circling for 45 minutes, the danger returned. The bombers' radar detected Japanese fighters, so Major Sweeney decided to abandon the bombing of Kokura and instead target Nagasaki, 152 kilometers away. In February 2017, a Hellfire missile fired from a Reaper drone struck a moving minivan, killing the man in the passenger seat. The incident immediately rushed to the front pages of news around the world, and the main reason was not just because of the man, but the top-secret missile used to accomplish the mission. In this video we will take a closer look at how the Hellfire missile works. The Hellfire missile weighs 49 kilograms, has a length of 1.62 meters, a diameter of 17 centimeters and a wingspan of 33 centimeters. It can fly at Mach 1.3 and has a range of 11 kilometers. The normal version of the Hellfire missile has a semi-active laser guide head at the front, which allows for high-precision laser point acquisition and tracking. Simply put, it detects laser dots on the target and guides the missile towards it. When the Reaper drone is in combat, for example, the indicator fires pulses of invisible, coded laser light, which strikes the target and bounces back into the sky and is detected by the guide head in the Hellfire missile. The missile makes course corrections based on the laser indication after launch, eventually hitting the top of the tank, which is the weakest part of the tank. Military personnel on the ground can also carry handheld laser pointers to guide the missile. Instead of carrying a laser guide head, the Hellfire longbow version uses a millimeter-wave active radar ground patrol system, which can find targets on its own. Behind the nose is an electronic autopilot, which collects data from the nose and guidance sections to control the missile's flight. Below the pilot is a 1.58 kilograms fusion precursor warhead, which is detonated by a proximity engine to destroy the tank's explosive reactive armor. Behind the precursor warhead is a 5.6 kilograms main warhead, which detonates immediately after the first warhead explosion, melting the inner copper shield to form a metal jet that destroys the tank's interior. Behind the main warhead is a pneumatic accumulator containing compressed nitrogen or helium gas, which is used to control the tail. Inside the rear guidance section are 3 gyroscopes, a roll gyroscope, a pitch gyroscope, and a yaw gyroscope. These gyros are used to sense the attitude of the missile in flight, and the autopilot corrects the position of the tail based on the gyro attitude. The Hellfire uses a TX-657 solid rocket motor for propulsion. Last but not least, the missile's 4 fixed tail fins have control wings on their trailing edges, which move with the help of aerodynamic accumulators, the principle of the anti-tank version of the Hellfire missile. As for the R9X Blade Hellfire, also known as the Ninja missile, you will have heard of its exploits. Instead of explosives, it has 6 long blades that cut through the target. These blades are so hard that they can cut through incoming bullets. We used it to compare it with an anti-tank missile, and the only difference between them is in the warhead section, where the 6 blades are fixed to the blade holder using hinges. As the missile approaches the target, the proximity fuse will deploy the blades, relying on the powerful kinetic energy to slice through targets in its way. The advantage is that it can be used for decapitation operations without harming innocent people. Notice the dark blue dot. It is where you are living right now. On Valentine's Day, February 14, 1990, ground crews made Voyager 1, 6.4 billion kilometers away, turn around and look back, thus snapping this photo of the dull blue dot, of which the Earth takes up only 0.12 pixels of the entire photo. As the greatest probe in human history, the story of Voyager 1 lives on today. Since its launch in 1977, it has flown alone in the universe for 46 years. During those 46 long years, Voyager 1 has made close observations of Jupiter, Saturn, and their moons, not only capturing a clear picture of Jupiter's Great Red Spot, but also discovering a thick atmosphere on Titan, and sending back tens of thousands of photos during that time. Since then it has been out of orbit and on its way out of the solar system. On February 14, 1990, while people were still basking in the joys of Valentine's Day, Voyager 1 had already flown 6.4 billion kilometers away from Earth and was heading for the inhospitable edge of the solar system. But everyone knew in their hearts that Voyager 1 this time was a journey that would never return. To commemorate this great moment, NASA staff made it turn around and take its last picture of the distant solar system and the Earth, leaving behind the famous dim blue dot, and then it flew off into the deep space of the universe without looking back. And so 22 years passed in the blink of an eye, and in 2012 NASA claimed that Voyager 1 had reached the edge of the solar system and would hopefully be the first man-made object to leave the solar system. On November 28, 2017, engineers sent commands to Voyager via the Deep Space Network to initiate an orbital correction, but because it was just so far away, even with electromagnetic Voyager 1, and the dusty 37-year-old trajectory correction thrusters were successfully ignited. Its ability to locate the spacecraft using a 10-millisecond pulse was also tested, which meant that Voyager 1 was still on course. No one could have imagined that Voyager I, which was designed to last only 2 years, would now have flown normally in space for 46 years, which has to be considered a great miracle. But sadly, the nuclear-powered batteries it carries will only last until 2025 at most, and in 2 more years, we will have lost contact with Voyager 1 completely. There will be no way of knowing where it will go after that. It may enter other galaxies, or it may be captured by a higher civilization. But according to the current navigation speed, it will take at least 40,000 years to arrive at the nearest star to our solar system, Proxima, by which time human beings may have already migrated to Mars or disappeared in the river of history. But the existence of Voyager 1 is enough to prove that human civilization once existed and was once glorious, and that's good enough. Humans are extremely small in front of the universe, and this dim blue dot already explains everything.